On the shores of West Bay Lake lies the crumbling ruins of Summerwind, a secluded mansion that's gained a reputation as being one of the most haunted locations in Wisconsin. Although the mansion was destroyed by a fire over 30 years ago, the ghostly legends persist, with stories of the supernatural spanning decades. The mysterious haunting of the Summerwind Mansion involved various families who fled the property after witnessing an unexplained series of events while living within its walls. Sightings of full-body apparitions, strange sounds, and disembodied voices were some of the unsettling experiences reported by former residents and people who explored the abandoned house. In this video, I unravel the dark and haunted history of Summerwind and explore the strange events that occurred in the mansion decades before it burned down. The history of the haunted Summerwind Mansion in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin dates all the way back to the early 1900s. Back then, the building that became Summerwind was a fishing lodge and a large vacation resort. The secluded property was owned by John Frank, a blacksmith who built the resort in 1914 and named it the West Bay Lake Fishing Lodge. Today, the ruins from the building sit on a narrow lot surrounded by private homes on both sides, but in 1914, the original fishing resort was one massive property spanning 80 acres with a lodge and several cabins along the lake. It is unknown if the original owner, John Frank, or travelers who stayed at the resort ever had paranormal encounters in the lodge or anywhere else on the property. Stories of haunted activity at Summerwind began after 1916 when Frank sold the resort to Robert Lamont, a wealthy executive who turned the rustic lodge into a family retreat he named Lilac Hills. Lamont began renovating the property shortly after acquiring it, and by 1918, only 2 years later, the former fishing lodge was transformed into an elaborate 20-room mansion. The mansion was complete with 4 huge fireplaces, a stone terrace overlooking West Bay Lake, and a separate living quarters for his servants. The Lamont servants lived in the mansion year-round and were the first known residents to have strange encounters. On more than one occasion, servants reported seeing the apparition of a woman in white wandering around the grounds outside. The staff also reported hearing unexplained sounds and smelling strange odors inside the house on a regular basis. Robert and his wife Helen hadn't experienced anything strange inside their newly renovated home yet and remained skeptical, but that would change one evening in the mid-1930s. According to legend, Robert Lamont and his wife were having dessert in the kitchen when they heard footsteps coming up the basement stairs. Moments later, the basement door opened, revealing the dark shadow of what appeared to be a man standing in the doorway. Thinking an intruder had emerged from the basement, Robert grabbed his pistol from a drawer and fired 2 shots at the apparition as the door closed, but the figure vanished. The Lamonts allegedly fled the property shortly after the frightening encounter with the apparition and never returned again, leaving the mansion empty and unused for several years until it was sold around the time of Robert's death in 1948. This photo was taken in 1987 by paranormal investigator Todd Roll and features the original basement door with the 2 bullet holes from Lamont's gunshots. Shortly after the photo was taken, the door was stolen by a trespasser only months before the house was destroyed by a fire. Lillian Keefer and her husband bought the Lamont Mansion in the 1940s, and it wasn't long before they started to believe it was haunted. The Keefers didn't live in the home, and for decades the property remained mostly vacant. Little is known about what the couple experienced during their visits to the property, other than Mrs. Keefer stating that she didn't feel safe being in the house alone. Mr. Keefer passed away less than 1 year after purchasing the mansion. It was rumored that he suffered a massive heart attack inside the home, but the official cause of death is unknown. After his death, his wife Lillian sold off most of the adjacent lots and cabins until all that remained was the mansion. Then in the 1970s, she sold the home to the Hinshaw family, and it was during this time that the paranormal activity escalated. The Hinshaws moved into the decaying mansion with their 6 children and named the property Summerwind. The historic house had been vacant for a long time and was in desperate need of repair. The roof was collapsing, and a colony of bats had taken up residence in the second-floor rooms. The father Arnold owned a construction company, and shortly after moving in, the family began renovating the house with the goal of restoring it to its original state. During the renovation, strange things started happening to the contractors working in the home. Tools disappeared, and workers heard disembodied voices coming from the empty rooms. Some of the workers even fled the property in the middle of a project and refused to return. Once the word got out about the haunting, the Hinshaws found it difficult to find contractors who were willing to work in the home. Once they learned that the property address was Summerwind, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Within weeks of the renovation, the Hinshaws realized they were not alone in the house and they were being tormented by a dark presence. They always felt like they were being watched. Windows and doors would open on their own, and at one point some of the windows had to be nailed shut to keep them closed. The family heard voices coming from the basement, and they saw full-form apparitions in the first and second floor rooms. The frequency of these events increased to the point that the family began sleeping together in the living room because no one felt safe sleeping alone. The haunting of Summerwind escalated to a dangerous level that forced the family to abandon the renovated house only 6 months after moving in. The father, Arnold, allegedly suffered a mental breakdown during this time, and his wife filed for divorce shortly after fleeing the house with the kids. He was allegedly never seen or heard from again. A later version of the Hinshaw's time living at Summerwind recounts a disturbing discovery the family made while painting a bedroom closet. The father removed an old drawer from the wall and found a small hidden room behind it. He shined a flashlight into the dark space and saw part of a human corpse with black hair still attached to the skull. The hidden room was sealed off with the corpse left in place, and the police were never notified about what they had found. Before moving out of the home, the family opened the hidden room a second time, but the corpse was gone. The story of the corpse in the closet is often doubted by skeptics for the fact that the police were never contacted about the incident, but the story is still quite disturbing and could have played a role in the haunting if true. In the 1980s, Summerwind received national attention after it was featured in Life magazine. After the article was published, trespassing and vandalism at the vacant mansion reached an all-time high and became a serious problem for the neighbors and the local police department. It was around this time that the Tracy family purchased the abandoned property and planned to turn it into a bed and breakfast, but those plans never transpired because in June of 1988, Summerwind burned to the ground. The city said the official cause of the fire was a lightning strike, but years later, nearby property owners who witnessed the massive fire said the building was destroyed by the fire department to stop the trespassing. Residents on West Bay Lake were notified about the planned fire in advance, and some even watched the historic building go up in a blazing inferno. What actually caused the haunting of the Summerwind Mansion is unknown. The earliest reports of ghost sightings on the property date all the way back to the 1920s after the Lamont family expanded the original footprint of the lodge and turned it into a mansion. The land on which the mansion was constructed was originally inhabited by Indians who built mounds and burial sites all over northern Wisconsin. If an Indian burial site was disturbed during the mansion's renovation, that could explain the paranormal events that began in the years that followed, but without burial records, we may never know what, if anything, lies beneath the surface. Another possible cause for the haunting is an unknown death occurring on the property at some point before or after the Lamonts built the mansion. If the Hinshaws really did find a corpse hidden in a secret room behind a closet, that could be the source of the haunting. Unfortunately, no records exist that we know of to indicate a death occurred on the property, and there are no police reports of the corpse because the police were never notified. Have you ever visited the haunted Summerwind Mansion? Do you have a story to share? Leave a comment below and tell me about your experience.